Good morning, everyone. This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. And today's lesson, I think, is going to be a pretty interesting one, and it's going to be a fairly advanced one. Today, we're going to be talking about something that we will call visual equations, the idea of something that might look as simple as this, that carries very deep visual meaning, and plots. And what I mean by plots are where we're going to start making charts, as we've done in the past, but now we're going to add in multiple dimensions of data. And the reason that we might want to do these things is because I believe we can use our simple equations and our visual plots to be able to represent in single pictures entire verbal concepts. Let me show you what I mean. Well, let's start with a story that everybody knows, The Tortoise and the Hare. I thought it would be a good exercise for us to go ahead and apply everything that we've gotten up to this point by using our now famous 6x6 tool to go ahead and tell the story of the tortoise and the hare. So if we take slice number 1, our who and our what, where we would draw a portrait, well, in this particular case, we have two characters, don't we? We have, of course, our tortoise, and we have our hare, otherwise known as our bunny. And then we've got something else. We don't just have the two characters, but we've got a thing. We've got a challenge between the two, because it turns out that Mr. Bunny over here, the hare, is a little bit arrogant, and Mr. Tortoise, as we know, has had enough of this arrogance from the bunny. So we've got three who's and what's. Let's go on to slice number 2 now, which of course is our how much slice, where we know that we create charts in order to quantify things. So let's make a chart that shows our tortoise and our hare, and then let's show the number that we have. And in this case, we have 1 of both. So there's a very simple little chart quantifying how many of our characters we have. But there's something else that emerges because our bunny's been arrogant. Our turtle has challenged him to a race. So there's another measurable aspect to this, which is chartable in the form of distance. So we've got something else that we can measure because there's going to be a race of x distance. Let's move on now to slice number 3. Where is this going to take place? Well, we know that we're going to have a race, and the tortoise and the hare have agreed that it's going to start at the big rock, and then the race is going to take them across the bridge over the river. It's going to take them around the hill, and they've decided that they're going to end at the tree. So our map says our race is going to start here, and it's going to finish over here, and the race is going to take this pathway from one to the other. So now we've got our where, and now let's go ahead and slice number 4, our when. Let's begin to plot out when everything happens and what exactly it is that takes place. So the race begins at sunup. The race is probably going to take most of the day, so we're going to go through midday, and then we're going to end the race at sundown. And now the plot thickens. Here's our turtle, and here's our hare. The turtle, his win picture looks like this. The turtle starts running at sunrise and runs all the way until sunset. And you know what happens? Here's the tree, and the turtle hits the end point. He hits the finish line. Our hare runs for a little bit and then takes a rest. And then runs for a little bit and then takes a rest. Runs for a little bit, takes a rest, runs for a little bit, now convinced that he's going to win, but look at this, does not reach the finish line in advance of the tortoise. In fact, the tortoise hits first. This was not what was expected. Well, let's go on to slice number 4 to see if we can't figure out how this happened. What was the cause and effect? And let's go ahead and start out again by mapping. As we know, when we do with a flow chart, we start out with our characters again. We've got our tortoise, and we've got our hare. And the tortoise, in this particular case, in Aesop's fable, has something that we're going to call discipline and slowness. And the hare has something that we're probably going to call arrogance and speed. So what actually happens is, if here is our endpoint tree at sundown, the tortoise uses his discipline and his slowness, and he doesn't stop, and he makes it to the tree. The hare, however, uses his speed and goes for a little while and then takes a rest. And then he realizes he's behind, so he better use his speed to start running again, and then he takes another rest. And then he uses his speed to start running again, and then he takes another rest. And by the time he uses his last bit of speed, he's too late. So now we have a flow chart of how did it work. Two different styles of doing the race. The disciplined, slow and steady style, and the sort of sporadic, speedy, perhaps more arrogant style. Well, there we go. We've just told the entire Hare and the Tortoise story with our 5 pictures. We know who our characters were. We counted them. We gave some measurable distances. We said, where does it happen? We said, when does it happen? And we even mapped out, how does it happen? But we're still missing something, aren't we? We're still missing what Aesop would have called the moral of the story, and what we're going to call the why. What is the underlying rule that this story wants to tell us? There are 2 pictures that we're going to draw to give us the why. One is called the multivariable plot, and the second one is called the visual equation. For the rest of the session today with you, we're going to draw both of these because they always go in parallel. And even though multivariable plot appears to be more complicated to draw, because the visual equation, as we see, is actually very simple, we're always going to start with the plot because that is what will drive the equation for us. Let me give you an example. The multivariable plot for our race of the tortoise and the hare is going to involve all of the variables that we've seen up to this point. And we're going to map them onto a coordinate system as we've done with our maps and our charts before. So let's go ahead and create a coordinate system that's trying to deduce the why of the tortoise and the hare race. Well, we had on one axis slow speed versus fast speed. So we had one character who was slow, our turtle, and we had one character who was fast, our hare. But then on the vertical axis, let's plot out something else. Let's plot out steadiness versus sporadic. And what we find is that the turtle sits firmly in this quadrant right here, slow and steady. And the hare fits firmly in this quadrant right here, fast and sporadic. Well, now let's map on another dimension that we talked about earlier, something that we're going to call perhaps discipline or perhaps arrogance. So let's say that this circle, this red circle, represents the amount of arrogance. The rabbit is very high, has a big circle in terms of arrogance, but the turtle has a very small circle in terms of arrogance. And let's say that discipline is going to be represented by a dotted line. The turtle has a vast amount of discipline, and the hare has a very small amount of discipline. So now we've got what we call our multivariable plot. We've accounted for all of the variables that we've seen, and we plotted them onto a system that allows us to say, perhaps what Aesop was trying to tell us through this story is that having the discipline to remain slow and steady is better than the sort of arrogance that might come from being very fast but being very sporadic. So this is our multivariable plot. It allows us to plot in all of the variables so that we can begin to see how do they relate to each other. Well, that's only picture number 1, because as we know, picture number 2 was the visual equation. So if we were to look at our multivariable plot and try to summarize it into one absolute simple takeaway visual equation, the visual moral of the story, we would say slow but disciplined and steady is better than very fast but very sporadic. And now what we've done is we've created a visual equation that we can take with us that is the equivalent of the moral of the story. And the beauty, of course, is now we can see it. It's important for us to be able to see it because, as we know, we want to be better at being vivid thinkers. Meaning, of course, we want to be better at being both visual and verbal, and of course, put the two together. So instead of just telling the story and being left with a statement that's the moral, we now have the maps and the charts that allow us to visualize the story and the final takeaway in visible form as well. And putting the two together means that we are never ever going to forget Aesop's fable. As we've gone through the last 6 lessons on vivid grammar, we've been through our drawings that covered our subjects. Last time we met, we covered our drawings that mapped out our verbs. The drawings that we're talking about today, our multivariable plots and our visual equations, are really the verbal summary of entire thoughts and phrases and sentences, really pulling everything together. Our fox would say there is a moral to this story, and the moral is ... and maybe I'll give you a little bit more and I can fill you in on some more details. And our hummingbird would say, well, that's okay, but you know, I'm interested in this plus this giving me that, and the way I know that to be true is because I have mapped those out. I've seen what the relationships are. It's the combination, obviously, of all of these that get us back on the vivid balance. Making this real for us, the vivid grammar graph, we've been through every picture on here now. We went through our portraits, we went through our charts, we went through our maps, we went through our timelines. We brought our maps and our timelines together to create our flowcharts, and now we're pulling everything together to give us our multivariable plots. Multivariable plots. It's kind of like cooking. We take some meat, we take some vegetables, perhaps we take some broth or some liquid, and if we put these things together in the right way and we let them cook together for a long time, we end up with a really wonderful pot of stew. A perfect example of a multivariable plot might be, I have this wonderful bowl of stew that I've created, and let's map out. It's both very nutritious and it's really, really tasty. It's probably higher up on the tastiness and the nutrition measure than any one of the individual ingredients. If I've taken the time to create my stew of all of my independent variables, I'm going to come away with a very satisfying and very fulfilling view of my problem. I can then come away and say, you know what, the time and the effort I put into making that good meal was worth it. This brings me to my simpler view, which is really the ultimate bowl of stew, when I actually take my bite of it and say, isn't that lovely? What am I going to remember about my dinner? The visual equation is really the moral of my story made visible. How are we going to draw a multivariable plot? Well, they will be complicated, but there is a process. The first thing we have to do is collect everything that we know about our idea or our problem. And if we've followed our 6x6 thus far, we've done that. We've got the who and the what, we've got the how much, we've got the wheres and the whens. We've collected that data. Then we have to begin to sketch out some kind of underlying coordinate system that might be able to contain all or most of those different pieces of data. Then we start plotting in our data. And this sounds a lot like we were making a chart, and it is. A multivariable plot is nothing more than a super advanced chart where instead of 1 or 2 different measurable variables, we might have 5 or 6 or 7. So the complexity of layering them in becomes much more challenging, but much more insightful. So then we've created our multivariable plot. We look at it and we say, do I see anything interesting? Is there an overlap of variables that wouldn't normally be compared to each other that gives me some kind of insight? If so, I continue until the essence of my essential idea or challenge begins to appear. Nice theory, Dan. Let's go ahead and make one real. Let's draw a multivariable plot together that says, why is Star Wars a better movie than Snakes on a Plane? Now, you may not have heard of the movie Snakes on a Plane, but back in the year 2006, it was getting a lot of attention. And since our goal in creating our multivariable plot is to start out with some data points, let me show you how Star Wars is considered measurably, quantitatively, a better movie than Snakes on a Plane. So Star Wars, which originally came out in 1977, since then, internationally has earned $797,900,000. So getting up onto $800 million. Okay, well that's just one measure. Well, Snakes on a Plane in its entire history earned $33,900,000. So about 1/20th the amount. So there's a metric that shows one is more successful than the other. But of course there's a deeper metric than that, which is really what is people's appreciation and caring for the two different movies. And if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, which is the most popular movie rating site, 93% of all people who responded who had seen Star Wars loved the movie Star Wars. 55% of the much more limited number of people who'd seen Snakes on a Plane loved Snakes on a Plane. So there we've got some numbers saying Star Wars is a better movie than Snakes on a Plane by any way that we can measure it. So let's draw a multivariable plot that starts to answer, well, why is that? We have to take a little side journey first. We have to meet a guy named Joseph Campbell, who was an American mythologist, a gentleman who read the great myths from all around the world. He read, of course, the Old Testament from the Bible. He read the Bhagavad Gita. He read the most famous myths and stories from cultures around the world and realized that almost all of these stories share the same sequence of events. A heroic figure starts at a point in the known world with a mentor, takes a journey through the unknown world, has a revelation, learns something great, and returns to the known world, having completed this journey. And it turns out if you look at all the great myths across the world, they almost all follow this very predictable pattern, which we are going to shorthand here in a visual equation to look like this. Start here, known world to unknown world, come back to where we began. This is what we call a myth. Now, the reason we mention this is here's George Lucas, the writer and director of Star Wars back when he was younger. And George Lucas was clearly a filmmaking genius. And one of the things when he wanted to tell his story is George Lucas referred completely throughout the creation of Star Wars to this cycle of the myth. In fact, George Lucas knew the work of Joseph Campbell very well, and when George Lucas was writing out the screenplay for Star Wars, had it map identically to each step of the hero's journey. This is important. We've got another data point. Let's go ahead and make our multivariable plot now. I thought one of the things that might be most interesting to talk about from my perspective as an author is let's look at the difference between the authors of these two movies. So again, to refresh our mind, we've got Star Wars, and we're going to shorthand the other movie called Snakes on a Plane, otherwise known as Soap. And I thought it was intriguing, I'll tell you why as we go through this, to plot out the author from what I'm going to call the lone genius, the single author working alone like George Lucas was, to the crowd author. Now the reason why Snakes on a Plane got any kind of interest in the media is because it was actually a screenplay which was written through crowdsourcing. The idea was that it was written online. So the original thought was put out by one author, and then it was opened up to literally millions of other people to help to write the screenplay. So here we have our lone genius versus our crowdsourced author. Then on the horizontal axis, let's go ahead and plot out what is the underlying nature of the storyline. And in this case, our poles are going to be on the one hand, the classic myth, and the opposite of that is what I'm just going to call the meandering surprises, which is something happens and then something else happens, which is kind of interesting, and that causes something else to happen, and you end up over here. So you've gone from here to here through a sort of meandering journey of surprises. Well, here we've got our coordinate system. So let's go ahead and start to plot in Star Wars versus Snakes on a Plane. Star Wars, written by a lone genius, following completely the classic hero's journey. Snakes on a Plane, down here, so this is Star Wars. Snakes on a Plane, written by a crowd of people following the meandering surprise route. Snakes on a Plane. Now, perhaps we could start to plot in some more data. Let's plot in here the audience response to Snakes on a Plane, and it was about this big. Star Wars is something more like this. So this would seem to tell us, if this was all the data that we put in, oh, that you must be a lone genius writing from the hero's myth in order to create a blockbuster. Well, that might be part of the story, but let's think about some other great stories that have been out there. And in fact, probably one of the most important where myth was derived was the story of the Exodus. This is Moses leaving Egypt, part of the Old Testament in the Bible. Exodus was not written by a single lone genius. It absolutely follows the classic myth story, and it has been crowdsourced by cultures around the world over thousands of years to create this story. So now what we're beginning to see is maybe what matters more than whether it's a lone genius or a crowd of authors for a popular, successful, memorable story is that it be based on Joseph Campbell's myth. So there we have our multivariable plot. And again, it's fascinating if you want to try to go ahead and map into here other movies or other stories that you might know. Were they created by individuals? Were they meandering? Or were they based on myth? Interesting things will start to appear. So that's how we create our multivariable plot. How can we roll this into a visual equation? Well, the visual equation is going to be a very, very simple image. It's the one that summarizes everything we saw in the multivariable plot. So in this particular case, we might be able to say that between a meandering story based on surprises, that's less than telling a story according to the tenets of the classic myth. And now we've got a visual equation that summarizes Star Wars is a better movie than Snakes on a Plane because the meandering path of surprises is less powerful than the power of a classic myth. Okay, that's kind of fun. Real world case study. This was one of the most fun projects I've had a chance to work on. This was a couple of years ago. I got to spend the summer working with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, one of the most prestigious and well-known oceanographic institutions and scientific organizations on Earth. Woods Hole is located near Cape Cod off of Massachusetts on the eastern coast of the United States. What really put Woods Hole on the map, though, was the discovery of something at this point in the northern mid-Atlantic. In the year of 1985, what did they discover? Well, they discovered the remains of the Titanic, probably the most famous ship of all time and probably has been turned into one of the great myths of all time. Now, it's fantastic that the Woods Hole scientists found the Titanic after it had lain under the water for 70 plus years, if you happen to be someone who's interested in myth. Scientists are not interested in myth, they're interested in science. And it has become unfortunate to be associated with the discovery of the Titanic because that is not perceived as hard science. And the problem was, as Woods Hole was looking over where its funding came from, that was starting to shift. So we created a spreadsheet that looked at comparing Woods Hole and how much money they made, $88.8 million in the year of 2001, primarily through federal spending, and compare that to other scientific and oceanographic institutions. How much money did they bring in and from what kind of sources? And as we went through looking at our data, we realized something interesting. I'm going to scroll down on the spreadsheet now. We included more popular scientific and environmental organizations in our list, including such organizations as the Cousteau Society, Conservation International, and Nature Conservancy, etc. And we started to find that the numbers were very different. The Nature Conservancy is now getting close to $570 million. So we thought, let's go ahead and ask the real question, who are all of the players in oceanography and how do they get their money? Now comes the multivariable plot. If the question is, who are the players and how do they get their money? We thought, let's make a multivariable plot which addresses exactly those things. And so on the vertical axis here, what we're going to plot out is not how much money is made, but how is the money coming into those organizations. It turns out that there are two very distinct ways that these organizations get their money. Either they get it in very few but very large grants and investments from states, the federal government, or from corporations. Or it turns out you could get your money from many sources, but each source is giving you a relatively small amount of money. In the end, the total amount in the end is the same. So then on our horizontal axis, let's plot out what do these scientific institutions actually do? From something we're going to call soft science, which is really public advocacy and sort of the popularization of science, through academic teaching, through applied research, and you'll notice as we move across the axis, we're getting more and more into what's called hard science. Less away from what's popular and more into pure research. So now we've got our coordinate system. We're going to plot out all of the competitors and colleagues of Woods Hole according to this axis. We're going to add a key now, and we're going to plot in each organization showing the size of its circle represents how much money does it actually collect, the color of the circle representing whether it focuses on the oceans or whether it focuses on land, and then of course we'll put a little boat in the middle if it happens to have any ships that the organization has access to or owns. So what we did is we put it all together, and here's what we had. Let me walk you through this really quickly. If we look at the most popular science organizations, look at Nature Conservancy. It's enormous in terms of its revenue, but it's very soft science. It's very much oriented towards popular science, very little research whatsoever. But at the other extreme end, way over here, the elite, the most hardcore elite of pure research scientists, there's Woods Hole right up there at the top. And you see it in terms of the size of its circle, it's pretty good. The only organization any bigger than Woods Hole is one called the Scripps Oceanographic Organization. So here we have the landscape, and you'll notice that there does seem to be this sort of line that moves like this. An organization is elite if it focuses on pure research, and pure research organizations get their money in few but very large doses. Popular science-based organizations can be even bigger, but they do not do pure research, and they get their money, again, through the public. So lots and lots of doses of money, but each dose is very small. And here we have the landscape in which Woods Hole sits. And the reason this was important is because these fundings were getting smaller. That's why we were brought in. I'm going to end this now because I want to share with you that the reason we created this multivariable plot was to show where can Woods Hole go, and we saw some options. One possibility would be to start to become more popular, to see if it would be possible to interest the general public in pure research. That would be one direction. So move from few but large funding sources to see if that can't be supported by smaller but more numerous funding sources. That was option one. Option two might be to stay up here as the elite but take a part of our organization, maybe make a museum or something like that that's open to the public, and move a part of us down here. So kind of split where we sit across this. Keep most of us as the hardcore scientists, but let's go ahead and see if we can't get access to more private money by opening up something which is more popular. And that would be option number two. And option number three would be to stay exactly where we are and get better and better at exactly what we're doing. So as these sources of money get fewer, we can still continue to get more of them. So that was option number three. So the reason I'd like to close this then was, what was our project equation? In the end, what were we trying to do? Our project equation looks like this. For the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, a very elite, research-oriented institution, we determined it would be better to continue to just get better at what we do than to try to split up and become more popular. And that became the driving force for our project. There's another way I realized that we could make a visual equation about this. We could imagine that this could be any scientific organization steaming along, saying we're the best, we're the fastest, we're going to continue to do what we do. And let's beware though, if we're not keeping an eye out for where we're going, we could have a very similar fate as the Titanic. Last thoughts about these two things. Multivariable plots. Difficult to draw. These are not like the other pictures that we've created up to this point, because a multivariable plot by definition demands that we have a lot of data. We better put together a coordinate system that makes sense, that allows us to begin to put in those pieces of data, collect the data, take the time to make the picture, take the time to vet it, make sure that you're showing something that is true, something that is accurate, and then look at it and see what kind of insights emerge. And then from those insights, create your visual equation, which becomes the touchstone for the entire project then. A square plus a triangle may give me a circle. Give myself a visual equation that summarizes all of the detail and thought I put into my multivariable plot. Your turn. Homework. I'd encourage you to work on drawing a plot and an equation. Point number 1, draw a multivariable plot, and I'd like you to draw any one of these 3. The future of personal computers. Let's think about what kind of coordinate system we might have for that, what kind of data we might want to include. Are we moving away from the desktop, more to the tablet, more to the laptop? Are we moving towards potentially wearable computers? Who knows? What kind of data would we need and what kind of picture would we draw to try to determine where is the computer industry going? Another option, what makes a great novel? What combination of elements, characters, storyline come together to make a truly great story? Or, for those of you who want to focus on your own business, now's the chance to do it. A multivariable plot. As many different variables as you can think of. Yourself, your customers, your competitors, your offerings, time, money. Map together as many as you can. Map out in your multivariable plot how your company is going to succeed. Whichever one of those 3 you've done, then, as step number 2, see if you can draw a visual equation. The simplest possible picture. Me plus my business success is going to make me a whole lot happier. That might be one. What would be yours? With that, let's go ahead and turn this over to student work. What I'd like to do is open this up to a little bit of homework. So last time's homework was flowcharts. So let's go ahead and look. And John, can you hear me all right?
Good morning, Dan. This is John.
Hi, John. Would you be willing to take us through your couple of flowcharts?
Certainly. I just wanted to choose the option of how I'd get a new cell phone. And on the top left hand, I just put the statement, time for a new phone. And I thought through a number of questions that would be asked, and those were in those. The first question was, can I afford it? And then it was a yes or no. And then I said, do I need it? And then you'll see I've taken the somewhat humorous or tongue-in-cheek approach with this, that for each question it's a binary, it's a yes or a no, and sometimes it leads to a new question. So say for the second question, do I need it? I'd go to the left and say, yes, I do. And then I ask the question, is it really cool? And then that leads to the next question, okay, yes, it is. And then I ask the question, do I already have a phone? And the answer to that was yes, but I asked another question at the same time in case the answer was no, and I said, is it a little bit cool? So the whole point was I'm trying to drive this to a conclusion which is somewhat amusing, I hope, for all of us. So I say, okay, do I already have one? And then if the answer is yes, I ask the question again, do I need another? And then I rhetorically answer the question, no, you don't. So each of these no answers you see is driving to the right-hand side. And I'll just go to the last statement. I say, I did not really want it anyway. So looking at all the questions, there's a yes or a no, and each of those questions has an answer, and then I just try and drive to sort of 3 humorous questions. One is, can I find it cheaper, which is on the left-hand side? And so I say, well, maybe I can, but read the fine print. And then I say, okay, if I can't find it cheaper, it must be an apple. And then I say, can I borrow the money? And then again I say, don't even think about borrowing money. So sort of 3 outcomes to asking the question. So I actually have a nice Apple phone. I'm thinking about, should I get it upgraded? So you can see my decision for Christmas.
You absolutely got it. Well, it's funny because in all 3 of the options, they basically all end up with no, right?
That's right.
I don't want it anyway. Don't even think about borrowing the money. And let's go ahead and read the fine print, who the service carrier is and how much this thing's really going to cost me.
Exactly.
But in the end, so are you going to get yourself a new phone?
Yes.
So the beauty of the flowchart, we go through the whole process and we say, you know what, I need one anyway.
Exactly.
John, that's excellent work. I want to go ahead and shift on then to one more flowchart coming from Shivadnan in Hyderabad. And Shivadnan, I'm going to turn you on as well. Shivadnan, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, Dan, I can hear you.
Hi, Shivadnan. How are you? It's been a little while since we've spoken. How are things?
Going great, Dan. I was a little busy, so I could take a couple of classes and I missed them.
Well, you've obviously caught back up. You did a beautiful flowchart. So can you walk us quickly through this?
Yeah, this is the general model of web navigation. Normally, a user navigates through a website. He enters the website, then first he feels like browsing. Then, if yes, then he clicks a section and clicks on a subsection, then looks for whatever it is and if he finds it, then he lives happily because his task is completed. What he wanted, what information he wanted on that particular website, he got it. Otherwise, if he did not find what he is looking for, then he is thoroughly frustrated and he may leave unhappy from there. Otherwise, if he doesn't feel like browsing, then he may look out for the search box on the website. For example,
excellent. Yes, okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, like Amazon, those websites normally they search because they're being very big size. So they search in the search box and type a query and get results. And after getting the results, they scan the results and check them out and find out what exactly they want, and they complete their tasks and they leave happy. Yes.
Yes, okay. Excellent lesson for us there. Shivadnan, this is a brilliant and very clear overview to just clarify the underlying reasons why, number one, things must be very easy to find immediately on browse, or if not, things must be very, very easy to find through search. If either of those is a no, bad. So this actually gives a good template for someone creating a website on what is really sort of the top level critical issue. Shivadnan, thank you very much. Hey, thank you all for another great lesson. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy, but don't go away. Now on our new platform, you can still submit your homework. Debbie, our community manager, is going to join you right now to show you exactly how to do that. And I really encourage you, do your homework. Okay, take it away, Debbie. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Napkin Academy classic video. We've made it easier than ever to share your homework. After you've completed your homework and have a JPEG or PNG file saved on your computer, come back to this course. Once you're back here, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and in the comments box, you can add a comment. I'm just going to call this one My Homework. You can also add images by clicking on the Insert Edit Image button here. In the source box, click on the file. In the Images window, click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. This is going to take you to your computer where you can search for your images. I'm just going to search for mine in Pictures, and I'm going to choose this image here. You can also add multiple images here. Click Upload. After the upload is complete, click Close. Then scroll down, and you'll see that the last image is here, and it's checked. This is the one we just uploaded. Click Insert. I suggest in the Dimensions box you change the maximum to 1200 pixels and leave the Constrained Proportions box checked. You can also add an image description here if you'd like. Click OK. You'll see that your image has been added to your comment. And now the last step, the most important one, make sure that you click the green comment button here to upload your homework to the Napkin Academy. We hope to see your homework soon.